So excited to be joined by David Ellefson. He's the co-founder of Megadeth. That's the legendary heavy metal band, of course. He's got a brand new book called My Life with Death. And David Ellefson, thanks for joining us this morning.
You're welcome. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. You've gone through quite a journey. You're now a Lutheran pastor?
Yeah, well, I'm studying to be. It's really technically a 4-year track through the Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. So I was able to do a year of Lutheran seminary, let alone playing in a rock and roll band the whole time.
Yeah, you're still with the band, right, while you're doing this?
Sure, yep, absolutely. Wow. In fact, this seminary track is an online thing that I'm able to do, which I like. You know, I started doing some online studies at the University of Phoenix back in, 1998. When we were touring, I was in Japan at the time. So the online type of continued education works really well for me.
All right, hold on. Now, I got to stop you because the band Megadeth started in that whole L.A. heavy metal scene there on Sunset Boulevard. We've all read about it. We've seen about it. We have all learned, I have been taught that heavy metal music is the devil's work. How do you go from that scene in L.A. and whatever you must have seen touring the country as one of the founders of Megadeth to being a Lutheran pastor? How do you mesh these two?
Yeah, right. I'm really bucking the system, going from a bunch of uneducated, devil-worshipping people to like being an educated pastor guy.
That's right. Oh, so clearly, you're the Manchurian bassist, is what's going on here.
Well, it's pretty cool. I mean, I think Megadeth, we've always been one of these bands where we looked out a little further than what was right in front of us for a lot of our song lyrics. Musically, we always pushed the envelope and went way beyond just 3-chord rock and roll. So I think it's in the fabric of what makes Megadeth to continue to look for things to enrich your mind, enrich your heart, enrich your soul, and that comes through the music.
All right, and David Ellefson, what was it like back there when the band was starting out? And I'm guessing you guys were probably all living together in some garage somewhere and just trying to scrape together whatever you can. How did you know, at what point did you know that you were starting to do something there in L.A.?
Yeah, it's funny. I followed a hunch when I grew up on a farm in Minnesota, southwestern Minnesota, and got into rock and roll when I was about 10, 11 years old. Heard it on the school bus, picked up a bass guitar about a year later, and these were just hunches over in me. And at age 16, it was an overwhelming urge from within to get out to L.A. And Van Halen was already popular. Ozzy Osbourne was getting a lot of his musicians from Los Angeles, and the scene was just bubbling. So I moved there directly 5 days after high school.
Wow.
And I got there in June.
I bet Mom and Dad in Minnesota were really happy about that.
Well, what the funny thing was? They were cool with it. And, I got to tell you, they my dad was a businessman. He ran a farm, but he was a businessman more than anything. And he didn't understand rock and roll and heavy metal, but the thing he did understand was to encourage me to go find my own path and live out my own dream. And I got to tell you, now that I'm a parent, that's a pretty good role to follow. And as a result, when I got to L.A., I mean, it was full on going on, and yeah, of course, all the decadence and everything else that goes with it. But more importantly, it was just this epicenter of heavy metal and hard rock, and it just couldn't have worked out any better. To meet Dave Mustaine 2 months after he left Metallica, and for us to form this new group, Megadeth, and to do our own thing in our own way and to make our own mark. And here we are 30 years later still.
Back to the book, though, My Life with Death. You get very personal. You talk about your drug issues. I mean, how bad did it get, and how long have you been clean?
Well, I've been clean 23 years. I got sober in 1990, and
wow, congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I guess probably getting sober and staying sober is probably those are the two hardest parts. But once you make the transition and you get on the other side, you're essentially, provided you follow some simple life disciplines, you're kind of free and clear. Honestly, the addictions and the drugs and all that stuff, that got in the way of the rock and roll. The rock and roll isn't what led me there. I had a really good life, but I happened to be one of those that when I took a drink at age 15, it was like Russian roulette and there was a bullet in the chamber. And so that to me is the qualifying thing. And that's why a lot of, rock and roll, of course, it sort of celebrates wild living and partying and everything like that. But there's a lot of people in the business that don't drink and use drugs. And yet there are people in other lines of work that do. So I think it comes down to really what makes you an addict or not, rather than lifestyle.
David Ellefson, the music scene has changed a heck of a lot since you founded Megadeth in 1983. Who impresses you in the rock and roll scene now? And for that matter, is there still a rock and roll scene, or is it all too corporate and cookie cutter and bubblegum?
Well, it's definitely different. The days of being able to, have that dream of, go be a rock and roll star. I mean, by and large, yeah, those days are kind of over. And the scene has dried up to a much greater degree. And a lot of that got changed by the Internet. Now, the good news is the Internet has put the power back in the hands of the people. And you can still write and play music, put groups together, perform, and stay more connected to your fans now probably than ever before. So some things have changed in our favor. But, like bands that I grew up on, like Kiss, I mean, they're still out there doing it. And we just did a show with them in Wisconsin this last summer. And
that must have been great. Wow.
Yeah, just stand on the side of the stage and be a fan again. And I think that's the thing, is we all start out as fans, and you have to remain a fan deep within. Otherwise, it really does just turn into a corporate grind.
Who do you listen to now? Who's on your iPod?
You know what? I listen to everything from heavy metal to Christian worship music.
Wow.
So it's like I'm probably the 180-degree opposite guy.
Well, listen, being a pastor or studying to be a pastor, there's a lot of evangelism that's going to go along with that new role. Are you going to utilize the band and use Megadeth to sort of to spread the word?
You know what? I just let it come to me if it's meant to come to me. I certainly don't go out and try to, stand on some street corner, making people believe as I do. Because quite honestly, my beliefs they kind of came to me. I didn't go searching for them either. And that way, I think it's honest and it's genuine.
All right, our guest has been David Ellefson. He's the co-founder of the legendary heavy metal band Megadeth, still going strong, by the way. And his brand new book talks about his journey through that time and now studying to be a Lutheran pastor. The book is My Life with Death. A quick exit question. There's a move here in Maryland and in Washington, D.C. to decriminalize marijuana. Do you think that's a good idea?
Anything that alters your state of mind puts you in a position where you were not originally created and intended to be. And so to me, that's just where I leave it.
Unless it's the euphoria you get from listening to heavy metal.
Well, exactly. But hey, you know what? That's created by people.
That's right. That's the natural high.
Exactly.
All right.
So, hey, get high the natural way,
Awesome. David Ellefson, so great to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.